For March 20th, 2023 to order. This evening, we have Lauren here to give a presentation in regards to our sewer cash flow review of that.
Hello, everybody again.
Hey, Mike.
Great. So every year we see an update on sewer cash flow, and we provided that historically. A little bit later than this year for a couple of reasons, but wanted to go over and just jump in and start with some of the assumptions here, as I think that'll drive the rest of the discussion today. I think you have hard copies of this in front of you. So the key to this discussion today is going to be the system usage. All right, and I'm going to track back to where this has been historically, what we've used for budgeting, and where we're going. So the updated assumption for sewer usage for consumption is going to be 323 million gallons. So this will be for fiscal 28 timeframe. So we're looking at a 5-year projection, which is our typical horizon for this. Previously, we'd used an assumption of 331 million gallons. In fiscal 21, the actual usage was 341 million gallons, which is better than what we had. And in fiscal 22, we were just shy of that number. We'll come back to that usage information on the next couple slides. For now, we're going to conservatively project no increases in usage for users. The concept here is that you're billing with your growth. You might have some declines with efficiency and usage, but you make that up with growth in users as we are a growing community. All right. The FY23 operating expenses, we've got an idea on where that would be from a re-estimate. What I want to be clear about is, yes, operating expenses have grown, but not necessarily a new thing. We have some expense growth, so we've been waiting to figure out exactly where that's going to be once the new work is online. All right. For a go-forward basis, we've got 2% annual operating expenditures, and that's an across-the-board calculation on that cost.
Mike, I'm sorry.
Yep.
What was and maybe you don't know, and it's not a problem if you don't, fiscal year 2022 operating budget.
Yeah.
If you want to come back to that at the end, we can.
No, that's fine. Got in there. Expenses.
1.24 was the actual fiscal 2022 operating expenses. And then we've got annual debt service payments of 2.46 million. That's unchanged. We haven't changed the size of the debt since we did the actual work project. In addition to the work project, so in addition to capital expenditures of an average of $825,000 per year over the 5-year outlook in the projections. That updated and tied into the equipment replacement and capital plan of the city. So that's not news, it's just a summary for you. Let's talk a little bit about the big picture utility finance metrics. This is for any community. Then we're going to apply the first set of assumptions in with these metrics and move forward. So really 2 items for sufficiency. I like to think of this as long-term liquidity and short-term liquidity. Long-term liquidity is the debt coverage. Basically, when you take out debt for the sewer utility, just like any other utility, what you're pledging to the bondholders, those investors, is that your net revenues, that's your operating revenues, less your operating expenses, will provide more than $1 for every $1 of debt payment you have to make in that upcoming year. So the lowest that's ever going to be is $1.10. Thankfully, the state, which is your only investor on the sewer side, that's their covenant. So you need to, and you have pledged that you'll have $1.10 going into each budget year based on your projections for that. That can range to $1.25 or more, and you want to manage to more than that because that operating cushion goes to your bottom line to do those renewal and replacement projects and keep those rainy day reserves funded. Speaking of those rainy day reserves, that's your short-term liquidity. That's the money you've got in the bank to address some of those projects, to smooth out the ebbs and flows. All right. Typically, a bare minimum of 90 days cash on hand. 25% of operating expenses is a good target. Now, historically, the city's financial policies called for 100%. That was pre-WRF project. We were a much smaller utility and we wanted to ramp up. We won't address that further today, but that is a policy that the city council could look at now that we're ramped up. I will tell you that in our projections here, we're not solving to meet the cash balance consideration. We're solving to meet the coverage recommendation. I want to be clear there. So the scenario details here. We're trying to meet that debt coverage requirement of 1.10 times. Right? Yes, we had that target of 100%, but in our 5-year outlook, based on what we're presenting today, we're not at the 100% by the end of that 5-year term. We're drawing down some of those reserves on those renewal type funds. Okay. So bottom line is on the second half of page 4. To meet those, we are projecting a need for more 25% increase to revenue in the near term. So with that, that would be in the very near term, like imminently for the upcoming fiscal year. And then just cost of living type adjustments. I've got 3% plugged in there for future years. Remember, that's on the revenue side. Operating expenses at 2% a year. All right. I want to be clear and go back in time. When we opened the original work bid, January of 2020, what we said at the time was that we were going to need the rate adjustment that was made and then 6% rate adjustments every year in future years. Because of the positive usage that we've seen the last couple of years, we did not make those increases. Now, because of the decline in usage, we're having to play some catch up. That 6% and 6% is approximately half of what we're talking about now that we just did not do because usage was previously stronger. I'm going to come back to this a little bit here as we move forward. So slide 5 provides a little bit of context for you here. I talked about previous year presentations. We talked about this was a blend of usage and rates. And because usage was stronger, we didn't need to change rates to come up with the same bottom line revenues. So you can think of it as good years, baseline years, low years. 21 was good, 22 was average, 23 started out a little bit low. We usually are looking at this every 12 months. We put a little extra scrutiny in for the first 6 months of 2023 because this was on our radar. And IMU had a new billing system. So I will tell you that staff worked very diligently along with IMU last fall into the winter to make sure all of the information we had was syncing up. It was a new system that's been in place for about 2.5 years now. And we went back those full 30 months just to make sure there was not any noise in there that we were missing on the usage pieces, because I think that would be the first question from the council and the public on that. You can have some variability month to month, continue to monitor actively as we have, but there's a few factors to highlight here, and I want to just address them here on slide 6. So one piece that was new last year that people might remember are some of the Simpson credits that began in May of 2022. The total impact through December was $21,000. So that's not a major factor that's there, but I knew it was something we wanted to at least address here. That did move the needle on kind of the business usage growth, but that's a small portion of your overall revenues. High strength usage, we saw really good usage in 2022. That was down for the first 6 months of fiscal 2023. But the piece that's driving this is the residential usage. It's a residential community by tax base. Residential usage was down 12.89% in fiscal 22, and we saw a continued decline in the first 6 months of 2023. So when that usage is down, keeping the rates the same, revenues are down. That's the short story there. Basically, we're not having the usage that was previously projected, and because of that, we're gonna have to make that up through rates on a go-forward basis. One of the reasons that the city, like most cities, has exposure to this is because your variable charges, so your usage-based charges, are a greater portion of your total sewer rate than your fixed charges. Now, that's something the city took steps to address the previous rate adjustment, put that closer to in line. But let's look a little bit at a later slide in terms of how that proportion goes forward. So what we're going to do today is talk about what that is. This is a work session, answer some questions from you folks, talk about next steps. Right now, with an 18-month trend, it's worth addressing at this point through some rate adjustments as we get into fiscal 24. We've talked a little bit about this, and we've done this best we can with staff to analyze what the dual plant management and then getting onto the new plant management costs will be. I think we're comfortable to the extent we can be at this time what those costs are, and they're included in here. We'd like to think that we're somewhat conservative, but again, this is where we're at today, and we've got to meet those debt coverage covenants as we've promised that to investors. So with that, the next steps will be to develop the rate framework, be able to create those revenues that we're targeting, and then adopt those through a sewer rate ordinance. Projected rates in here are open to discussion. There's some other rate classes and tiers that can be further evaluated. So for instance, this discussion today. The next slide is going to get back to that kind of fixed versus variable consideration. And then as I said, on those, historically, we have worked with, Andy gets the information, HR Green gets the information. Ames does a nice survey of all communities over 10,000 population to do a comparison. Now, I always give the same caveats, and I'll repeat that today, which are, this is backwards looking, right? So that is a 2022 report that was published in beginning of 2023 based on what people told you their rates were last year. Everyone is being forced to adjust new rates this year, and not every community has addressed the nutrient removal that your new work plant handles. So other people have more capital needs, more debt, and more costs. So everything's backward looking. So if we talk about where rates are today, that's probably not an apples to apples. And definitely when we're talking about rates where they're going to be, that's not apples to apples, but it's the best we've got. And I'm sharing that with you here. So there are 43 communities over 10,000 population in Iowa that are reporting. Indianola for base rate ranked 17 out of those 43 with the current $18 per month charge. That's the only fixed rate that you're currently charging. We're using about 4,000 gallons for a residential monthly bill. That would be about 38% of the total bill. I'm calculating fixed expenses for your sewer utility at about 58%. That's probably too low because realistically, there's a number of operating costs that you have to run. So overall, what we're talking about is putting more of the adjustment onto the monthly minimum charge to create more certainty in those revenues going forward, despite what usage would be. And that would move the usage charges or the fixed charges to about 42% of the overall bill. Not a major move, but continuing to move in that direction of better lining up revenues with expenditures. This is not an Indianola unique situation. This is everybody. We've all been operating in Iowa under a very old paradigm on water and sewer rates, right? Graphics. Everyone loves those. Reds are the high one, and then we use Indianola colors on there. Hope everybody enjoys that. A lot of words from me, so graphics. I don't think there's a whole lot of explanation. The one thing I'd be clear about is they use cubic feet in the Ames report. So that's about 4,400 gallons instead of 4,000 gallons for the apples to apples if you're scoring at home. But this is the context here. Not at the highest. Right now, our rates are a little above the median. We talk about going higher. The why. And I think the council's heard this from me enough times, but I'm just going to explain again for public consumption. Here's the why. Most of the cities in this over 10,000 have a metro bend, right? So they're in the Des Moines metro area, a large city themselves, or the Cedar Rapids, Iowa City corridor. We know WRA corridor, Iowa City does their own thing, and then Cedar Rapids has their own treatment that most people ship their wastewater to. Those create a lot of scale opportunity. Indianola just doesn't enjoy that. It was explored back before the WRF process about joining WRA. The transmission did not make that make sense from a dollar standpoint. So I just want to be clear, one of the challenges there from a capital change. So what does it look like on rates? I've talked about allocating more to fixed charge, and this is a for instance here. What this would be a $7 across the board on the base rate, and then some adjustments on the usage charge. Overall, we're just talking about just shy of $12 per month. And this is for a typical residential customer, about 4,000 gallons of consumption. That's based on the water bill. 12,000 would be more like a small commercial type idea there overall in their bill. I think this is just a snapshot of the residential small commercial impacts. High strength charges, et cetera, in your rate ordinance you might want to address. That's probably beyond my own expertise. That would take more of a cost for development. Something I might need someone like HR Green to take a deeper look at, make sure things are allocated correctly here. I know that's a good amount to digest. Some of this is pretty familiar for you folks other than kind of latest updates, but I'm happy to answer any questions. First, I just want to make sure with staff if there's anything that's leaving out.
In our current system, Mike, you're talking about a 25% revenue adjustment. What dollars are we talking about total that we need to make up for deficit that we are running right now?
Yeah, so just to kind of a year of consideration to keep that. I'm looking around $900,000 was about the total there. And the idea is you're just a shade under 4 million revenue. And we need to get it to about 4.8, 4.9. And again, we're going to be growing from there, kind of the 3% kind of cost of living adjustments each year. Along those lines, Steve, I mentioned the operating costs. We've got plugged at 2% going forward.
Yeah.
But the other piece of this is because of the increase in cost of managing water and wastewater systems around the state, we've seen something old become new again, which is have a standard cost of living adjustment every July 1, January 1, to avoid the shock type rate increases. So I'm just throwing that out there, not necessarily in here, but those are factored in. So that's right.
Well, with the new plant line, and you looked at a lot of numbers here, and maybe this is a question for Rick or staff, but I'm assuming a lot of these other cities around 10,000 or the Metro wastewater URA have a lot of catching up to do to where we are right now. Is that correct? And
Yeah.
so they're going to be looking at additional potential issues. Is that where you're kind of coming from?
That's 100% right. Richardson, and what I would say around the state, as the typical bearer of bad news from 100 miles away, 50 this time, is that, look, it's not that rates are going to be high. They've been artificially low for a long time. And I'm not talking specific to Indianola here, but we're looking at pushing about $60 on an average residential bill. We're going to be looking around the state for pretty typically water and sewer separately at $100 each. That's the cost of water treatment. And I think people need to recognize that that's where it's going to be. Keep up with some of the standards that are required around the state.
Just to be clear though, we're not going to get there this year.
No, and again, you guys have scale. I know we're comparing ourselves to over 10,000 population communities, right?
Right.
Well, you're a lot bigger than a lot of other communities too. And their scale of treatment is much larger per capita than others. Right. So this is a statewide and nationwide consideration.
I think I asked that question before, Steve, and I'm sure, right, but I think we're one of just a handful or few that do the nutrient treatment that's up to what the DNR's new permits are requesting.
I think I read somewhere it was like 4 or 5. Would that be right?
Yeah.
It wasn't very many.
Or that have done it, 5 that are talking about it kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we're ahead, and that was one of the things that when we first started talking about this, that we knew we were going to be jumping up the line to where we were going to be higher than most, but they were all going to catch us eventually. But we were just getting it taken care of sooner rather than later. And two, that was the other thing too. We were also told for a long time that we were artificially too low for too long a time.
So the other question that I would have is local option sales tax that we passed, a fair portion of that's going to that. In your calculations, was some of that used then in that particular case then, or more allocated towards that or not?
Nothing has changed from the base case there. So $1 million of annual debt service is under a GO bond issue and regulated by sales taxes.
Right.
That is constant in what's here in the projection. That continues.
But none of it's to operations or maintenance or that kind of thing.
No, if any.
Yeah, right now we're using it for capital. We're
As you
using
go.
it for WRF, and then there's about 500,000 that goes into 710 for capital.
Yeah, capital improvement project. Yeah, I understand that.
When was our last rate increase?
I think it was for fiscal 21. So it might have been done shortly after the WRF project was bid. So spring 20. Yeah. That's right. Earlier, around this time, 20 years ago, implemented for July. Right.
Hard to believe that was 3 years ago.
I don't
know.
Mhm.
Maybe said this, but the high strength usage down 4.36 for the first 6 months. Does that count on the rest of the 6?
In the projections, yeah, because we've just kind of lowered everything out to
Does it
that.
usually fluctuate a lot or what?
So overall, it's been in a. Rick, you could probably speak to this more. There's some variability there on the high strength usage, more so than the residential, and that just makes sense from a business standpoint overall. So what we're talking about there, Rick, you can better correct me, but we're talking about kind of 5 million gallons of usage on a $30 million gallon total. So a variability of 5 out of 30 to 35 million. That's a pretty good chunk.
We're not
That's
expecting it to
20%.
balance out or come close at any point. It's just gonna compound.
I think, not necessarily compound, I think it's going to potentially have variability on a go-forward basis that you need to continue to monitor. And what I would tell you is the same thing I tell other communities like you, there's not a whole lot you can do.
Right.
Except continue to communicate with your high-strength users the best you can.
Rick? I think I can account to the decrease for the last 6 months. My daughter moved to Ankeny. Yeah, but she'll be back in, the usage will go back up.
And Johnny, you probably know this answer. I'm trying to look at this history. The previous increase between 2020 was 2013, 2012, something like that, right? It was quite a while.
Been 8 years, I think.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I was understanding the history of it.
It was one of those things where when we talked about the rate increase, we said, knowing, like you mentioned, we knew going forward, there was gonna need to be, so it was like, let's start now and just kind of work it up slowly rather than dumping it all on at the end type of a thing, so.
So the projected rate increase that you're suggesting right now, am I looking at this correctly, that you are in the, I wrote it down.
$7.
Yeah, but I was thinking that's somewhere about 14%. What is that, an increase percent you're looking at?
It's more than 7 out of 18. It's like 35%. That's on the base charge. And then the net effect of an average bill is at the 25% element. That's where the revenue.
Guess my initial reaction is, yeah, we need to do what we need to do to make sure the money's there, but I'm wondering if it could be something that could be phased in. I guess I'm asking that question. So as well, because that's a pretty hefty. Go ahead.
There's two factors of that. Typically, I would say, yes, that's possible. However, I mentioned that debt service coverage consideration, right? And what we need to do under those covenants are have a projection that our projected net revenues for the next fiscal year will meet that 110 covenant. So if we know our debt service and we know we have a projection of our operating expenses to the best of our ability, we need to set our revenues such that project a 110. Hence the reason for that being more of a near-term focus. Now, if you did get down the phasing approach, and I'm getting farther in the weeds than I'm sure staff would like me to, you could do that, but you'd be in a situation where throughout the course of the year, you're catch up. So your phasing gets more narrow and you'd be better off getting it done up front and continue to monitor from there. I know I said this several years ago, and when we had usage increase, it worked. When usage was tough in the past 18 months, the situation is that it could help you reduce the scale or need for those future cost of living adjustments if for some reason this produces more revenues or net revenues than we're currently expecting. But with the information we've got, that's what we would need to do to set accordingly next fiscal year.
Like gives me a little bit of heartburn, but I know that we are certainly lucky to have state-of-the-art plant. Sure we've got to pay for it somehow, right?
That's right.
So it is a lot of money to increase, especially on I try to think of the elderly and a fixed income that every penny counts. Yeah. Fortunate to have state-of-the-art facility.
I'm sensitive to that. I give a lot of these similar presentations, so I understand that it's all relative to your community. So anything I tell you about comparison to other cities, it's going to have the value that it's going to have. The $25 base rates, again, for those larger communities, it feels like it's on the higher side, but we're doing $50, $60 base rates around the state right now.
Really, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there's no additional funds that we could pull from the lost, the help even some of that out, so the rate increase wasn't drastic.
You can do that, but since it's a utility operations, your utility fees should pay for the expenses of the utility. It shouldn't be subsidized by another, especially something that revenue that's elastic like that.
Only reason I'm thinking that, because when we initially put that in place, I mean, it was to help pay for that facility, so.
It's supposed to be used for construction of it. So, and for the debt service.
I think we have a different understanding of that, but I think that's okay. I think just from previous readings, you know, and I'm not trying to get in the weeds either, that 100% of local option sales say, there's actually a press release right here, on the city's website, 100% of the local option sales tax would go to the wastewater treatment plant. So if there is a way, I think that's what
Right.
Christina's trying to ask, if there is a way. I know we had to meet our obligations and the past is the past, so we're just trying to move forward. How do we do that and try to decrease this if we can?
Sure.
And you know, typically like we have a high elderly population
Mhm.
that I think is gonna be really affected by, I mean, it may not seem like much to us, but somebody who is on a fixed income, that could mean dinner for a week, you know, so. Like you said, it brings me heartburn.
Mike, let's assume that we went the route you're suggesting on revenue and rates. How long do you think it would be before you'd have to take another look at that without using any other monies to supplement this?
Well, I think Andy and I pretty much always look at the actuals kind of done in the book. So July, August timeframe, we take another look. I think with what we've got with the utilities set up, right? IMU's transferred to a new system and software. We can update that regularly now. It's not going to be a learning experience. So, you know, later this summer, you'd be able to take another look at everything.
But I'm asking, you're saying that towards the end of summer, we're gonna come back with another rate increase, or we're looking at?
No, I don't think that's necessarily the case here. I think you're budgeting for the upcoming fiscal year here based on the usage information that you've got. I don't know how you would be materially changing the usage information that you're looking at for fiscal 23, right? With a few more months of data. I think 6 months of data here is pretty good that we know now it's an 18 month trend of reduced usage, right?
Right. So you're saying that we need to be at that $1.10 per dollar borrowed with our loan rate, is that correct? And you're suggesting, let me go back up here a minute, and you're suggesting that we make up that $1.10 through an increase in the base rate, or we just,
The combination of rates with more weighted base rate.
okay. I guess my thinking is that since we're talking about the actual bond, we're talking about the $1.10. I guess my thinking would be if we can look at in the near future, and I realize lost is a real potential thing for our capital improvement projects and other departments and everything else, but I would think that to maintain that $1.10, that we'd want to look at that lost monies to a certain extent, not necessarily cover the entire amount, but look at the lost monies to a certain extent.
So let me just parse that, and I didn't want to interject on the previous discussion, but so I want to be clear is that the sales tax portion that's repaid, the $1 million of sales tax towards this plant, those were specifically issued as general obligation bonds so that we can unlock the ability to use sales tax dollars to repay them. Under the code, we wouldn't necessarily be able to service sewer revenue, the rest of the debt with sales tax dollars. And that's the hook under Iowa code.
There we go.
So that's why the city, and I'm speaking out of turn, Andy, so please interrupt. That's why to kind of meet your needs, Councilmember Beach, the city's allocated those sales tax dollars to the pay-as-you-go capital projects in an effort to get towards that. And I appreciate that that's just a concept here. That's the hook.
No, that's the explanation I needed, because otherwise, you know, I'm sitting here wondering why we're not.
Makes a difference.
Yeah, it makes a
Yeah.
difference, absolutely.
So your workarounds get cumbersome transfers and things like that, that
Right.
don't address your debt coverage covenant.
Right, gotcha.
The other concern is lost dollars are used in the general fund for general fund usage and take revenues from the general fund. You have to figure out where to come up with new general fund dollars, which translates into the
Tax rates and levies.
tax rates and levies and things that we're being capped on state. Really, your utilities should be self-sustaining. General fund subsidies, but and I mentioned this before that I've been through this. This isn't first rodeo in this regard, and having constructed a state-of-the-art facility, the one benefit really is that we do have taken care of the EPA and DNR requirements. We have taken care of the nutrient issues. Those other cities that are going to be taking this on are going to be taking it on at a higher cost of construction with the new rates and the costs of labor and everything else. And so we're actually ahead of the game, and overall over the long term, our rates will be lower compared to other cities. Greatest benefit is the fact that this facility is state of the art and has increased our capacity, set us on for great economic development, both commercially, industrially, and residential.
Do we know, have we heard anything on IMU, like raising water rates? Do we know, like, is that something that's, so people are gonna get hit with both, basically?
So they are looking at water. Water's their concern right now. That's their aging infrastructure. I know that Chris has put together a comparative of all our utility rates, inclusive of the cities, compared to with our city compared to other municipalities out there. And he's refining that data right now. He sent it to us preliminarily to take a look at it. And I think we rank about seven out of 16 in the metro area. So we're really quite average on our current costs. And I believe he used the month of August as his comparable month. I look forward to him presenting that to the IMU board and would like to invite him to present that here as well.
Can we, we have those select cities that we use for salary study. Would it make any sense to make some comparisons with those cities as well?
That's a great point. So he initially presented it with some of the metro cities. I actually made that exact suggestion. That's why some of the data went back. We have collected it for the comparable cities that we use for our salary survey as well. And that's why it was bumped up to 16.
Okay.
So
Cool.
that
Good.
dead on.
This sewer report, the Ames Sewer City report, it literally has the water. It ranks us. So when I look at this, if we were to do this increase, we would be the fifth highest in the state.
With a leading edge,
Very true. I do like the I gotta end that more positively, right? Maybe, I think I might have missed another one, actually. I missed Spencer. So, okay.
Yeah, on the I-7, it's 6.7, it's right there. It's just,
Yeah, because it's so little.
yeah,
We'll trust you, Mike, not me.
on base rate, I think that's right. And you can kind of see if you read the line, there are different approaches to how to handle sewer rates that are in there. One of the things then I would just add to is lean on HR Green for any rate comparison beyond maybe your usual list, because sewer treatment is so unique to each community. So they might have some, hey, here's some unique situations. Where are some of those here with Indianola, and here are the three other communities like this and what they're doing, because your water quality and water treatment is going to be more tied to those than your peer communities that both are worth evaluating.
exactly right. Because each municipality is different with different infrastructure, aging issues, different problems, and so what I think Chris was really trying to accomplish is looking at all the rates, because some utilities were going to be higher and some were lower. He wanted to look at what does it cost to live in Indianola compared to living in Ankeny or Altoona holistically.
So I see that the next steps would be a first reading April 3rd. There's a way we could delay that so we could
That's my first.
find out what I mean. We do have a joint meeting. That first week, it's 16.
Exactly.
If maybe we can just-
These are just a order of operations. The dates were with your next few council meetings. This is the council's decision in terms of implementation. So that would be the earliest time that you could do this with regular meetings with 3 readings. But to your point, probably merits some more discussion, IMU, and then I think the target date would be implementation for for the start of the fiscal year so that you get the longest benefit of these rates.
So just to back up one more time, that you're looking at base rate first 1,000 gallons of $25 is what you're suggesting. Then 11.50 over 9.85 on any 1,000 gallons over.
And Councilmember Richardson, we could go as many scenarios as you want to see on this stuff. I think the bottom line is average bill just under $60. However you parse it, the more you put on the usage side, the more volatility you would have with future usage of the system as a whole.
And you said you think that going forward, you know, the state as a whole is gonna start to see those fees being like upward of about $100.
We're already moving there. Right? So the smaller communities, we're not seeing that, right? It's kind of behind the scenes. And a lot of those are implemented over a multi-year project because the plans take 2 or 3 years to build. So yes, we're moving in that direction by the end of the decade.
And my last community, the base rate was actually $42 total with usage, averaged $58. So pretty in line.
And you got a new facility in Sandeman.
Ours was a little bit different. It was a membrane bioreactor that allowed us to reuse the water because we had a fully pressurized secondary irrigation system. But this one is much larger and has the capacity to take storm drainage in and really has that wide expanse to be able to handle huge amounts of volume that you don't get in arid states.
I will add another positive note that we did property tax levy thing, so there's no increase in theirs.
Thank you for making that point.
That
was very big.
Positive. But everybody will blame us anyway, so it's okay. We got big shoulders, we'll take it.
Really good.
It's all right.
Well, my feeling is obviously that needs to pay its own way. You know, we need to find a way to make sure it pays its own way. And that's just required of any utility that you have. You can't subsidize it with other rates or sources, in my opinion, but it is a big jump and hopefully we can minimize that. I don't know. I guess my other thought would be, is a 3% accurate? I mean, with inflation still at 6 and some percent, you know, or is 3 or 4% going to be enough in the future to deal with?
That's a year-to-year consideration. This is going to be a big budget year. I've seen fiscal 24. And I think from there, you're going to have a better baseline on the operating expense side to go forward. And the team did an excellent job with the best that they can with the information available. Right. So
It's pretty much based on residential usage, I mean, right?
you guys are just so heavy.
And there's a lot of unknowns with operational costs in the first year of a new facility. Bugs will be worked out, efficiencies will be found, and help us.
So as you mentioned, maybe it's just a COLA thing that, you know, you look at the rates and its cost of living and kind of.
I just want to thank staff. This was something we've been working on since the fall with a lot of back and forth along with IMU. So I thank IMU for their patience in the process as we got along with the software, but everybody on the city team, Rick, Andy, and Jackie did a ton of time and we're going back and forth here. So it's a great team effort. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Item number 2, discussion regarding upcoming agenda items from within the regular March 20th city council meeting at 7 p.m. Any discussion? Prior to the meeting?
I'd like to talk about 5M. You know, recently we expanded the territory for EMS and fire down south, and this is wanting to expand it further west. My question is, how come Hartford or Carlisle's not picking up that territory? It seems like we're broadening our zone, and it might maybe decrease coverage for our own community here.
I believe these are renewals.
Yeah,
Well, we're currently covering it already.
we are covering, those are all renewals. We have
seven contracts with townships and 2 with the cities, which is Ackworth and Sandy.
It's nothing new. It's just a,
The only new piece was actually the annex of water.
How come Carlisle's not covering Elmira? Isn't it closer?
In some areas, yes. I don't know. It was done before I was here.
Okay. All right, I didn't know if it was new, but I think, thank you for the clarification.
This is actually the second time I've heard contracts. Or renewed them, I should say.
Every 3 years, is that right? 5 years.
Every five.
The other thing to keep in mind is we're capped by the state, what we can ask townships for, was it
0.606.
6075, which never covers our costs in a lot of ways. And so it's one of the other things that we could probably talk to our state legislators about is, is there a possibility that we can, look at for those kinds of services to increase the property taxes that we get from particular services. So.
Well, if they're not covering our costs, why don't we not renew the contract and then say Carlisle or Milo can pick up a portion of those western communities?
I mean, who ultimately makes the decision for what community?
Trustees. Township
Trustees.
We're just so good. Just a commodity to have on board, right? So busy.
You're right. That's why we have those odd shapes in those other townships. The trustees in that area, and they voted to have that service, pick up that service.
We can't deny it, right? We have to accept it if they voted that way.
Be pretty hard.
I think you'd end up in court.
Yeah, that's what I want.
Thank you for the clarification, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I had some questions on item K that I had planned on pulling, but if she did.
Sure.
So for the fee schedule, really the only thing that I had issues with was the request for public records. So fees that we're gonna be charging for those requests, I guess. I'm wanting more clarification on those. So on there, it's talked about, I was trying to find it real quick while he was talking, but I think it was like $25 per.
Let me breathe. I'm trying to find it too for you.
Five, what?
It's under.
I guess my thinking was that I was gonna ask some questions about that too, Christina, but I was gonna do it during the council session, just put under consent agenda, so I don't have to pull an item off of the. Just ask a question.
I found it. No.
Oh, you
If
did.
it doesn't take very much time, we don't charge at all. It's just if it takes a lot of staff time and if we have to copy a lot of pages, then we'll charge for
That's
the
true.
copying fee.
The only reason I ask is because in the Iowa code code section 22(2), it grants every person the right to examine a copy of public record. And that includes the right to do so without charge while the public record is in the physical possession of the custodian.
They can
So-
do it. Not charge.
And we're not gonna charge them, like, if they're standing there viewing things for an hour, we're not gonna be charging, because on here it says that we're gonna charge them an hourly rate for clerical time.
A lot of times what they do, if I'm not mistaken, Jackie, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that somebody will ask for certain records pertaining to a whole slew of things. So for them to find it and copy it off and provide it for that group is what I'm sure you're talking about.
Yeah.
Where they're not actually standing there, but it's a email request, it's a phone request or something along that line.
I routinely get a request for our claims,
Yeah.
like every quarter. So I send all the claims and I just email them and there's no fee.
I guess I just still have an issue with. I mean, if we're not gonna charge for our time.
So this is one where I, again, don't have a lot of experience in the state of Iowa, but what's typically, what I've seen in other states is that the first 15 minutes is free, and then you charge an hourly rate corresponding to the cost of the employee, the lowest level employee that could complete that within a reasonable amount of time, which is mostly so that it doesn't become onerous. Some cities out there receive FOIA requests daily, hourly. They are.
I attended a league, I was sharing earlier, I attended a League of Cities program, and they shared where there was that had requested excessive information and just exhausted staff time. And so you want to be, friendly and customer service related when you can be, but if they're just using staff time in a non-meaningful way just to find some or try to get some gotcha thing that's probably never going to come about, it's not good use of time.
I guess,
Our fee schedule actually says if the number of pages to be copied exceeds 25 pages, or if the staff I'm involved in providing the records exceeds 30 minutes, then that's when we start charging the hourly rate. $5 every 15 minutes.
And typically, we can turn those type of things over fairly quickly. Most people are never charged. It's the onerous ones. And I can think of.
Yeah, they shared.
is that even,
There was people.
what if a document is over 25 pages though? I mean, are we charging them then?
We're making, most of them like.
So that was gonna be my next question. If it's an emailed copy, we're not charging them.
Not unless it takes over half an hour for some reason to put it together.
Any other questions? Have a break until we will have our meeting. 23, would rise for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
To the republic for which it stands, nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Got some reverberation.
We do, we have a little bit of an echo. Still there?
Member Hewlin? Here. Parker?
Present.
Colby?
Here.
Schroeder? Each? Here. Richardson?
Present.
Mayor Erickson?
Present. Moving on to item number 4, public comment. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak, you can come forward, state your name and address for the record. Right. On to the consent agenda. Are there any items that need to be pulled from the consent agenda this evening? Hearing none.
I'm just gonna ask, we ask some questions. I have a couple of questions here. if That's okay.
Absolutely.
Go ahead and we'll get the emotion.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Second. Thank you, Heather. Discussion.
On number resolution H on naming depositories, we kind of walk through, who we're gonna name on those. You're Dan or somebody if that's possible.
Yeah, I can do that. Okay, well, name the depositories, it's everyone that we have currently, Bankers Trust, Iowa, Bankers Trust is our main investment, Iowa Public Agency Investment Trust, a joint investment trust agency with several public agencies. We do have True Bank, who we normally have our banking services with. City State Bank, we don't currently have any funds with them. Currently our People's Bank, but we do have the revolving downtown investment program with them. And then we took Wells Fargo off because we did have some money in the Wells Fargo account for our procurement cards, but we no longer need to have that account with them. So we took them off.
Thank you. The reason I'm asking folks is simply because of all the banking issues that have been going on recently. I just want to make sure that publicly knows that we've done a pretty good job of dispersing our funds and working to make sure that happens. So the brush facility dates and pricing, or can you kind of mention that, Ben, if that's possible? For a minute.
Sure. Let me bring up the dates really quick. Pricing has not changed from the prior year for the brush facility. The dates are April 1st. April 15th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. 1 day only spring drop-off event is planned. And curbside pickup and recycling day is the week of April 24th through the 28th. AP, is there anything else you want to?
Oh, I think you had it. I mean, it's free yard disposal date. April 1st to April 16th. And then also from October 28th to November 19th is free yard disposal.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We did talk a little bit about the fee schedule in the council study session. I'd ask a question about fiscal impact on that. It's not negligible. That's the information I got back. So that was a question I had. AP, I should have asked you to stay up there. Can you mention on one of the items on the agenda was the Highway 92 Buxton street light. There was some information there about closing some access to some parking, and we'd be trying to talk about that.
Yes, so when this was previously approved by council, when the engineering contract was approved by council, it was just to put a new signal, nothing about ADA access, nothing about improving traffic safety, no signal preemption, no fiber connectivity. It was just a signal replacement project. But during the process of developing the preliminary scope of the work and applying for the Iowa DOT grant, if you remember, we finished a deep study, traffic engineering assistance program study. As a part of that study, we were going to apply for a DOT grant, which is eligible for up to 55% matching funds from the Iowa DOT. As a result, since we have high chances of getting that grant money, we thought of increasing the scope of the work by adding fiber connectivity, signal preemption for the fire department, improving traffic safety by making sure traffic, if there's any driveways that's really close to the intersection we are bringing in traffic safety standards. Also adding, there's one corner of the intersection that doesn't have any ADA sidewalk ramps. So we thought about including that of the studies, which is fairly significant. That may also, since it's going to be a DOT project, will also include easement acquisitions for the driveway closures. So it is a significant jump from what we previously predicted it to be. So we thought we should be doing that because it's eligible for DOT funds. We will add this to the scope of the work. That's why we are bringing this item to you.
So, sorry, the only question that really came about me was then all the parking lots that are currently there are going to have access to the highway. Though. Is that still correct? One way or the other?
Yes, we will not, none of the parking lots will be denied access. It will be limiting access for safety of the traffic.
Thank you. All the questions I have, Mayor.
I had a question, well, not really a question, I just want it to be on the record, because I had asked Jackie on the police and fire reports if she could find out why we're charging a fee for those, no matter what. I think it was like $5 for police and fire records, and since those are public records, it should be, I think, done at the same fee schedule as what he's doing for.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you, AP.
UAP, Jackie, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Dalby,
Aye.
Aye.
Richardson.
Aye.
Hewlin.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
On council reports, I need a first and second motion to receive and file the February 2023 EMS billing activity report. Moved.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? And a question, Ron.
I had my question already.
Okay.
One meeting, Ron.
Good.
Looks good.
Thank you.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Metro Advisory Committee report with Richardson.
Thank you. I think you all have received a copy of my messy notes from the meeting that I had, and some interesting things in there. House File 1, obviously, which is already passed and was signed into law. Significant changes there on assessment growth. The other ones would be Senate File 356 right now, which is probably a hot one, along with Senate File 550. Both of those have significant impacts to our community as far as assessments and how we can handle those. Lowering our 810 levy from 810 down is what obviously one of the reasons they're going to move this bill or want to move it. There has been some slowdown of that a little bit, which is a good thing. If you haven't had a chance to write our legislators yet with the impact, I'm sure Andy can give you an update if he's done some additional calculations on that, but please do so. Senate File 550 is the one that rolls back commercial property from 90 to 80%. It also then changes local option sales tax. That was approved by Senate Ways and Means, but it is hasn't moved forward much in the House. But again, remember, these are bills that deal with monies, and so they can go through Ways and Means Committee, which is not subject to funnel. And that's something to keep in mind. So right up at the end of the legislative session, they can be done. Some other things on there that one thing, Senate File 174, which prohibit a city or county from establishing design standards, is not alive on the House side. I don't think that's probably going to go anywhere this year. And then there's some other things there I think you all saw, but I think the league has done a great job of putting some stuff together from the league side. If you want to go to their website and look at some of the calculations, you can do that. I know Andy has done that as well, and I appreciate his work on that too. So my report.
Moving on into the mayor's report. We have actually a special guest tonight. Chief Scheer couldn't be here this evening, so Officer Shoemaker Is that right? Shoemaker or Schumacher?
Schumacher.
Schumacher. Had it written out right too. Is here joining us, keeping us safe. Thank you to our streets department and how well they did getting the streets cleared off. Kind of a crazy end of winter. Spring cleanup, as Ben mentioned earlier, is April 24th to 28th. I know we're all excited about getting stuff out of our houses and on the curbs, but we're already starting to see it appear and some of them, they're sitting there a little bit long. Again, spring cleanup 24th and 28th. And the Mayor's Youth Council, we will be taking a tour and meeting with Representative Bowden and Senator Garrett next week on Wednesday, the 29th. That's all I have.
I missed something I should have thought of. With springtime
Mhm.
potholes, I stopped by today. I was driving by the AP's office and told them about that were pretty big in a street in my area and already got them taken care of. So I'm assuming they can just notify if people see them to notify you guys online through the website and because they don't know everywhere. So, and that helps. They can get those filled right away. Then that keeps the moisture out and keeps the streets from deteriorating any faster. So other eyes are always nice. So if you do see something, go to the website, go under the Public Works Street Department and let them know that there's a hole in your area. Thank you.
Absolutely. I did. I'm glad that you had something to say because I almost forgot. I have 2 events for the Warren County Historical Society. They have the Soup Supper Trivia Night on Tuesday, March 28th at 5 p.m. And then the
Fundraiser too, yeah.
is fundraiser. Bring some money. And the Warren County Historical Society annual garage sale is scheduled for Saturday, August 26th.
So those items you put out on the curb.
Yeah, if they're functional,
Historical Society, so.
take them there.
Yeah.
Right, thank
You'd have heard
you.
of Kathy had you not mentioned.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
She's not here, but I'm sure she's tuning in, so I got you, Kathy. We will move on to public consideration. Item A, old business. We have the fiscal year 23 budget. I need a first and second motion to open the public hearing regarding an amendment to the City of Indianola fiscal 23 budget. Thank you, Jackie.
Councilmember Dalby?
Aye.
Beach?
Aye.
Richardson?
Aye.
Hewlin? Aye. Parker?
Aye.
Mayor and Council, what you have before you is the third and final amendment for the FY23 fiscal budget, which ends June 30th this year. Before you consider a resolution to approve the amendment, we have to hold a public hearing. Public hearing has to have a notice in the paper of general circulation within the city 10 to 20 days prior to the public hearing. We did have a notice for this public hearing March 7th, published in the Indianola Herald. Our revenues for the budget amendment is listed there on the screen. So what a couple of the notable ones are we're receiving county ARPA funds for the industrial park improvements and also the borrowing for the industrial park improvements. And then also the a grant and then they also unused shared expenses for a streetscape. Some of these are projects that we're currently doing that we already budgeted, but because we have to, just estimate how much we're going to be doing in one fiscal year compared to another fiscal year. We put more into FY22 and put less into FY23. So because there was a little bit of delay, we didn't have as much done in FY22 and did more in FY23. We just have to have council approval for the higher expenditures in FY23. That. And so that leads into the expenses. I was telling Ben earlier that I chose this clip art because a lot of these are just investments in the community, investments in staff, and also into our structures. That's all I've got.
Tell me how that money tree grows, because
Yeah.
I'm really interested.
Reading this right, the overall, The amendment is to the ending fund balance will decrease by 147,000. Is that?
Right, but that would be offset by the savings that we had in FY 22 because we didn't spend as much in FY 22. So we're spending FY 23 compared to FY. Projects like the WRF and the downtown streets.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this matter? Need a first and second motion to close the public hearing.
Moved.
Second.
Thank you, Jackie.
Councilmember Dolly.
Aye.
Page.
Aye.
Aye.
Hewlin. Aye. Parker.
Aye.
Need a first and second motion on a resolution approving an amendment to the city of Indianola fiscal year 23 budget.
That's a move.
Any other discussion?
Councilmember Hewlin. Aye. Parker.
Aye.
Page.
Aye.
Page.
Aye.
Richardson.
Aye.
Now the other business, we have city managers report. Ben Reeves.
Didn't have a lot to report. I've been out of town for the last week, spending time with family. So just want to thank Annie for covering for me and thanks all the department directors and all the staff for a good week. Everything this week ran well. And just want to wish everybody a happy spring as of 4/24 today.
All right, I need a first and second motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Or adjourned.
7:18.